The Defence Secretary Ben Wallace is meeting other NATO foreign ministers in Brussels later. They'll decide whether to draw up plans to send 1,000 troops each to Bulgaria and Romania and possibly to Slovakia and Hungary. And we can speak to the Defence Secretary now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Will you support the plan to send troops, and how many British troops would be involved?
Well, I'm not sure I recognise what you've just characterised as the plan is that the NATO and Supreme Allied Commander Europe had asked for obviously the 30 NATO members to submit extra forces to him in order for him to deploy should either an invasion of Ukraine happen or indeed as a way to deliver a deterrent. We put forward a range of forces, extra Typhoon fighter jets to patrol over Bulgaria and Romania, increased towards a brigade level size in Estonia, where we already have a battle group troops, put 1,000 troops on readiness. They'll be in the UK at the moment, but their job will be to go wherever they are needed should Russia invade Ukraine and that overspill into another number, people or humanitarian crisis overspill into neighbouring states, and finally more ships on patrol in the Black Sea and indeed the Mediterranean. So those things were put in. Saka has accepted them. All the other countries have done similar issues. The French have talked about deployments alongside the United States to Romania. Hungary is going to put more forces available within Hungary itself. And I think there's a range of options being put forward. And I think the key here is what we will do as the 30 members of NATO is endorse those plans. We'll endorse, giving Saka the authority. He's the most senior general in Europe. Give him the authority to step up NATO's readiness and prepare the alliance to make sure that we provide that deterrent and reassurance to many of its members.
Is the deterrent a numbers game or is it a game of diplomacy? Because if it's a numbers game and we're led to believe that Russia has between 130 and 147,000 troops massing on the border, then what would be a deterrent number, do you think, of troops?
Well, it's a mixture. So, first of all, at the moment, Ukraine is not in NATO. And so if Russia were to invade Ukraine, as I've said previously, it wouldn't trigger NATO self-defense, the Article 5 that is at the core of this defensive alliance. So you wouldn't see NATO troops deployed to fight in Ukraine. Ukraine is not in NATO. But what does happen is a number of countries, small and large, who neighbour Ukraine could face significant destabilization from massive refugee flows or indeed the Russian armed forces getting even closer. And therefore, in that environment, it is about not only a numbers game, but it's also about a multinational game. In other words, it's many flags of the alliance you can have on the borders means that Russia would have to make a very different calculation about what its next steps would be. Now, I don't think Russia is going to suddenly start invading other countries. I do think it does use destabilizing methods such as cyber, political division, hybrid warfare, as we've often talked about, to unsettle those countries or appeal to minorities in those countries. And so in that environment, it's about a flag game. A number, as we can show solidarity, that is a strong message to any country that would threaten us. And we have always delivered our defence in Europe through collective defence and indeed through a multinational response. That's why NATO has been around for so long.
It is obviously a very confused picture right now, and some people will say, well, that's intentional on the part of Vladimir Putin. Reports yesterday that Russia was going to or had withdrawn some troops, some confusion about who these troops were. Were they taking part in military exercises? Were they part of this 130 or 140,000? What evidence, if any, have you seen or has anyone seen of this withdrawal?
We haven't seen any evidence at the moment of that withdrawal. And in fact, as of yesterday, and it may change when I get my latest briefings later today, but as of yesterday, we were seeing a continued increase in things like field hospitals into the area. And indeed, we saw some movement of Russian military forces from sort of holding areas to more front-footed deploying areas. So, in fact, the build-up in that stage or the deployment was in a different direction from those public messaging. But, who knows in the last, 12 hours and the rest of the day what we will see. I very much hope that we see a de-escalation and a return to barracks of many of those forces. And I think, if at the end of this, we see no invasion of Ukraine, that will be incredibly welcome. If we see the removal of forces that at the very least have been involved in intimidation, that would be incredibly welcome. And then we can certainly decide how we're going to address the challenges in the future.
Okay, there's two quotes I want to ask you about. We have about 3 minutes left, so I'll ask you to be brief if you can. Russian Foreign Office spokesperson said yesterday, February the 15th, 2022 will go down in history as the day Western war propaganda failed, humiliated and destroyed without a single shot fired. What was your reaction when you heard that?
Well, I think I know who that spokesperson is. She's quite a regular contributor to wild statements. I mean, I don't really respond much to those sort of statements. I think the reality is that February the 15th, February the 20th, February the 25th, it doesn't really matter what day. What we had seen is, 150 odd thousand troops built onto the edges of another sovereign state. We've seen cyber attacks, we've seen all sorts of things going on. I've been a soldier. You don't go to that levels of readiness. You don't deploy strategic weapon systems. You don't build field hospitals and stop them if you're just going for a training exercise. So I think let's just, I really don't really engage with that.
Okay. The other quote is one that came from you when last week you said there was a whiff of Munich in the air from some in the West. What exactly did you mean? And would you choose to rephrase that now, do you think?
No, because what I actually said was if Russia invades Ukraine, there will have been a whiff of Munich, because in the 1938 Munich agreement, it wasn't about the appeasement, which was one part of it, but it was also about the fact that all along Adolf Hitler had a pre-plan to invade large parts of Europe. In other words, everyone had sat about trying to negotiate on a straw man. And I wrote an article about 3 weeks ago about the allegations by Russia that somehow NATO was encircling them when only 6% of their border is coupled by NATO. That the danger was, if Russia had gone ahead and does go ahead and invade Ukraine, all along, it will have shown that they had a plan to do so. And they certainly do have a plan to do so. That's why they put 160,000 troops on the border. I think that's what I was saying, and that was what ultimately happened all along in Munich in 1938. It was a charade. Adolf Hitler had other plans, and I think the question here was from President Putin: did you have this plan all along?
Ben Wallace, thank you very much.